In this video, I'm going to show you another essential audio processor, and that's reverb. We're going to focus on this saxophone track from the Soul Cries Out session, and I'm going to go to Plugins, Reverb, and choose AIR Reverb. This is one of the stock reverbs that comes with Pro Tools. And we don't normally, at least I don't normally, put reverb directly on an audio track, and I'm going to show you in a later video what I do instead. But in this case, we're just going to play around with the controls, and it's totally fine. If you ever want to experiment with putting reverb directly on a track, there's no mixing police that's going to come after you. Let's look at the controls here. So down here at the bottom, we have the mix knob. And the mix knob is how much of that reverb effect is mixed in if this is placed directly on the track. So if it's set to 0, that means it's not mixed in at all. There's no reverb. But if I play this, same old signal. We call this a dry signal. It's unaffected. If I make this 100% wet, then it's totally affected. And wet is the name we give for an affected signal. And it usually refers to time-based, like reverb or delay, but it can also be used for saturation and distortion and some other things. But this is 100% wet. Very different. You might think, wow, that sounds kind of cool, and it does, but it probably wouldn't be appropriate for the mix to have it at that level. So what if we cut back and we do, I don't know, like a 30%? Maybe 25. So no matter how much I pull down the mix, it's still a little much, and that has to do with the other controls that we're going to go over. But for now, we're going to set this at a 30% mix. That's a good amount to start with. The other knobs we have up here, we have reverb time. This is just how long the reverb lasts. And what a reverb actually is like a haze of echoes, right? It's echoes that are so close together, you can't hear them as separate echoes anymore. You hear them as a cloud of sound. So let's see what happens when we add and take away reverb time. Cleans it up kind of a lot. Ooh, a 12.8 second reverb tail. We're getting pretty avant-garde there. Let's bring this reverb tail back to like 1.5 seconds. We'll just go with that. Balance. So this says ER and tail. ER stands for early reflections. And if you imagine a room and you're talking or playing or singing or rapping or whatever in the room, your sound is going to bounce off surfaces all over the room. Some of those surfaces are very close to you, and that sound echoes back to you straight away. Other surfaces are farther away, or the sound bounces like a bunch of different times before it comes back to you, and that would be the tail. So the bounces that come back to you right away are the early reflections, and if I put this knob over to here, then it's going to be pretty much all early reflections, very quick, short reverb delay things. You can barely hear it. You really can't hear it at all. So if I add more tail in, then it's a little hazier because the plugin is focusing on the tail. So we'll keep that balanced right now towards early reflections, but we can change it later. Over here we have room size. This has another drastic effect on the sound of the reverb. Just the size of the room, right? The larger the room, the more reverby it'll be, the more reverb you'll have. So if we cut the room size down, it'll have a drastic effect on the sound. Sounds like you're in maybe a practice room. Maybe a small club. Now like some kind of large, I don't know, church or something. So the room size, the reverb time, the balance, the mix, they all go together, right, to sculpt the sound of this reverb and how big it is, and what kind of space you're in. And then pre-delay also plays an important part. Pre-delay is how much time goes by before the reverb kicks in. And so the top setting here is 250 milliseconds, which is a quarter of a second. And you will notice that the saxophone comes in and then there's a distinct echo a quarter second afterwards. Did you catch that at the beginning there? Try it again. Having a long pre-delay, it makes it more like a delay with reverb than just reverb. So you can use pre-delay to sort of clean up the attacks of an instrument. If your reverb is like sort of destroying the attack phase of the sound envelope, maybe adding some pre-delay will help clean that up. In the middle here, we have all of these controls that are associated with these larger knobs that help sculpt the sound. I'm not going to go over all of them in depth. Let's just take a brief look. So this is a set of controls to help sculpt the early reflections, right? In this balance section, you can have different algorithms. When it says type, they're just mathematical algorithms for what type of early reflections there are and how much do they spread out, right? Over here we have a reverb in and out width and a delay control, and this sort of controls the shape and timing of the reverb apart from the reverb time. The room qualities, ambience and density. This would be like, okay, well, I mean, if you had two rooms that were the same size, but one had like velvet curtains all over it, all right, and one had just bare concrete walls, they're going to sound very different. And these ambience and density controls sort of affect that. And then down here you have an EQ section, two separate sections for high frequencies and low frequencies. And you can use those to blot out either the highs or the lows, or accentuate the highs or lows of the reverb tail. And so all of these controls together give you a lot of ability to control and hone the sound of the reverb. And I'm going to show you in another video how we can use these to sort of give depth right to the entire mix. But for now, play around with this and watch the next video to see how to actually use the reverb in a mix.